Leeds Learning Alliance, organised by the Leeds Learning Alliance, celebrating 7 years of looking at a project on making Leeds a city of the child. And Hilary and Terence were presenting their book, and we hit it off straight away. Long story, very short. After having this conversation with these two remarkable peace workers, I found myself visiting Cambridge and then ultimately becoming a student of Cambridge. So my advice to you is never have a conversation with Hilary Cremin, because you'll take you to places that you really need to go to. But over the course of doing my master's, looking at the positive knowledge, power and politics, and having again the delight to have Hilary as my supervising professor, we explored some areas of similarity in terms of looking at transrational. Where does the spiritual and the ancient fit in with the modern and the scientific? And out of that has come the peace matrix that Hilary's going to share with you now. And over the past few months, things have moved on a pace, and we are now being invited to work with Cambridge Assessment International to create a profiling tool to look at the issue of violence in schools. And this is a very exciting project, which will look at the whole person. And what Hilary is going to share with us now is really that journey and how we've created this, moving on from the matrix, but now created these profiling tools. And as she said, we welcome your thoughts, your ideas, and your contributions to this. And if you look into the chat, you'll see we've actually shared the slide for this session with you. These are on Google, and based on the feedback from you and our conversations with others over the coming weeks, this will be refined. And so you'll always have access to our latest presentation. And with that, I'll hand back over to Hilary. Thank you, Hilary.
Thank you, Roy. So you should be able to see the positive peace matrix in front of you. Could you just raise a thumb? Yes, good. You can see that. Okay, so just to add to what Roy has just said, Cambridge Assessment actually were in touch with me over Christmas via LinkedIn to say that they had been contacted by a lot of their schools. They have a school improvements service and connections with 10,000 schools across the world. And they said that many of their schools were getting in contact because post-pandemic, there were problems of violence and intolerance in their schools. So young people were losing the ability to coexist peacefully, and they were seeing an increase in bullying. So what these schools were asking for through Cambridge Assessment is some way of understanding and measuring what the behaviours, the violence that they were seeing happening in their schools. And so with this as a challenge, thinking about how could my work inform that process, I went back to the ideas of positive peace and started to extend and extrapolate them in ways that could ultimately form a measure that could be used in schools. So what you can see there down the vertical side is the usual peace building, peacemaking, peacekeeping, with peacekeeping at the bottom. But you now have across the top a different axis, which not only talks about the nature of peace, but also about the scope of peace. So what we're now looking at is peace, all of these different kinds of working with peace, but at the level of inner peace or well-being or intrapersonal peace, outer peace or interpersonal relationships, community and global, and then finally ecological and peace that is to do with the cosmos. So we're broadening the scope of the peace work that we're doing. And just to remind you, when we're talking about peacekeeping, peacemaking, peace building, when we're talking about peacekeeping, we're talking about preservation. So that's about safety. Ultimately, it's about negative peace, but it's about the avoidance of harm and violence. So preserving the status quo, preserving human rights and so on. Peacemaking is about restoration, restoring things after conflict has occurred, after harm has happened. So peacemaking is responsive, reactive. It happens after a conflict has occurred. And then finally, peace building, which is proactive. That's about growth and change. And within peace building, you're creating the capacity of communities and groups to be able to engage in peacekeeping and peacemaking activities, and also to extend into working towards more peaceful futures for all of us. So I'm just going to hand over to Roy to explain what happens at the intersections of these boxes. Our matrix, which we'll show you at the end, has something in every one of these boxes, but just to give you some examples.
Yeah, so if we just look at the first one, Hilary, you have boost and you have control. So we're not going to give each of the boxes. We will give you this at the end. And if anybody would like the summary rationale document, we can send that to you. Basically, the intersection between inner peace and peacekeeping within a school context looks like you'd find in most schools: protecting personal boundaries, maintaining mental and emotional well-being. And the agenda of some years ago for focusing on the social and emotional aspects of learning was very much at our fore, and that may seem to have been lost in some communities. In peacemaking and outer peace, and again, there's intersections for all of this. This is about resolving conflict non-violently, using the full spectrum of conflict resolution. And again, the Leeds Learning Alliance and Carmanah schools that we've been working closely with are experts in this area, and I'd refer those to you. And then if we look at peace building, the intersection of the ecological peace building with ecological, if you could just hit the return there, that'd be great. This is more complex and requiring more conscious awareness of who we are in relationship with. So learning to care for the planet, going beyond the Anthropocene and honoring the more than human, making the invisible visible. And we've had conversations about whether or not we should even use this term, but learning to be in love, the optimum state, neurologically, psychologically, for being present. So each of those is a rich area for development, and the profiling tools that we've created indicates people's levels of awareness and engagement with each of these boxes. So the peace audit tool is in development. It looks like this. And again, we're in Cambridge tomorrow. If you click on the link to the form, just there. Oops.
Yep. Sorry.
That's okay.
It's things are leaping around. All right, link to the form. Here we go.
There you go. So again, and this is nearly complete, but if you all the forms, if you scroll down, we're doing the usual sort of checking in, but we've linked the questions. We just want to quickly show you the questions that both the children and the adults would answer, and that is an indication of their relationship with either inner peace, outer peace. And you'll see the language for this is we've made this simple but not simplistic, because we would like every child and every adult to be able to grasp this. We're developing, once they've developed the school peace audit tool, which is for everyone, we then look at a personalized tool in terms of their relationship with conflict. But again, we're not going to share that with you today. We just want to give you a little indication of what we're doing. Is that okay, Hilary?
That's absolutely brilliant.
Okay, so if you click on the tab with your new direction for positive peace, it'll get you back there in the middle.
Okay.
To the right.
Oh, I'm getting
your mouse is going loopy.
Right, so if I go,
there we go.
Slideshow. Why won't that work, Roy?
If you click on the actual slideshow rather than the down arrow, you'll be fine.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so first of all, we created the positive peace matrix, and then from that, we took what was in all of the boxes in the matrix, and we created descriptors using the simplest possible language so that a school could do an audit of who in the school feels safe, who doesn't, who feels that their rights are respected, and to what extent. And so clearly that can be used as a way to audit conflict and peace within a school, and can also be used at pre and post as well, if a school was wanting to see how much progress that they had made based on any kind of intervention. So that's the first thing that we've been working on, and the second thing is really, really exciting. So this is a second tool that we've developed, and this tool merges restorative practice with conflict styles, which the Rahim and Manga have created these conflict styles. I mean, they've been used in management circles in different ways over the years, used very much in business to help teams to understand conflict. So we've taken the conflict styles and the questionnaire and restorative approaches in schools and merged them. So what I'm starting with here, what you can see on the screen, is the restorative justice social discipline window. Now, many of you will be familiar with this, but some people won't be. So those of you that are, please bear with me as I just explain what it is. So you've got here two axes going from low to high. One is around control, discipline, limit setting, and the other is around support. And restorative practitioners say that you would need to be in the top right-hand window, where you are showing high control and high support with your discipline in school. And that would be characterized as being authoritative. And when you're in that window, your discipline is with students. Whereas in the other three windows, your discipline's either to students, that's when you're being authoritarian, so you've got high control but low support, or you're not using discipline at all, so you're irresponsible, and in that window you're being neglectful. In the bottom right-hand window, you're being paternalistic. Your discipline is for students. Here you've got high support, but low control. Okay, so many restorative practitioners over the years have talked about the importance of doing discipline with young people, not to, not or for. We can answer any questions about this at the end if you've got any. Moving on then to how we might begin to amalgamate this with the conflict styles. So the conflict styles also use axes, and they're around concern for self and concern for others. And so when you bring these together, you've still got to, with, not, and for. You still want to be in the top right-hand quadrant, because you want to be resolving conflict with people. we're introducing here compromise, which comes from the conflict styles, which isn't in the restorative discipline window. That's medium concern for self and medium concern for others, because you're settling for a compromise rather than going the extra mile and working to find a win-win solution that will be good for everybody. Okay, so finally, we have all of the 5 conflict styles. So you can see that they map really beautifully onto the restorative window. So for 2, we have competition. For not, we have avoidance. For 4, we have accommodation. For with, we have collaboration. So you can see that the aim is still to be in that top right-hand window. So finally then, we have our conflict literacy window. Okay, so you'll see that we've removed the axes here. So it's no longer the case that you need to be in the top right-hand window. We still have the different conflict styles. So we still have collaboration, accommodation, competition, and avoidance. But now we're introducing the idea that wisdom is the capacity to move between all 4 windows. So sometimes it's necessary to compete, sometimes it's necessary to avoid, and so on. So we've moved the destination of the journey from being in the top right-hand corner to being right in the middle. So if you are able to move dynamically and easily between all of these positions, you are a peace builder. So for example, when you are collaborating, you're a peacemaker. When you are accommodating, you're a servant, as in servant's leadership, you're providing a service to others. When you're avoiding conflict strategically and wisely, you're a peacekeeper. And when you are protecting others through forcing or competing behavior, you're a warrior who is making sure that our communities are safe and just. However, the final element that we've added into this conflict and peace literacy window is one of dynamism, because we find that an awful lot of measures and psychometrics are quite static. And we're wanting to bring in the idea of a spectrum. So, for example, within the collaboration window, in the creative iteration, you can be a peacemaker, but in the excessive or destructive iteration, you might be a saviour. So you might always be jumping in to sort out other people in ways that may well not be helpful. Likewise, with a servant, you could end up as a victim or a martyr or a slave. So someone who is excessively accommodating to other people to the detriment of themselves. Likewise, as well as being a peacekeeper, you could simply go to sleep on conflict. You might be so afraid of conflict that you avoid it in unhealthy ways. And as well as being a warrior, you might end up as a dictator. So what we have here is various archetypes. Archetypes that are potentially more creative and expressive, and archetypes that are potentially more destructive. And so the work that we're trying to develop here is how can we support people to think about which of these archetypes they operate within in situations of conflict? And of course, it's not always going to be the case that we always act from the position of peacemaker or warrior. We're going to choose which position is right according to our conflict literacy, our understanding of conflicts for any particular situation. We may be a warrior in the classroom, and we may well be a servant with a parent or a child. And even within a school as an organisation, there are so many different kinds of relationships. We can help people to think about how they are in relation to others, how they resolve conflict in relation to others, with all of the complexity of relationships and the situations that people find themselves in. So I think this is the time for us to pause and take some questions. Roy,
yeah, if people wouldn't mind, just if you have any thoughts or questions, we've tried to split this into two sections. So we're really interested in your feedback, we're really interested in having a dialogue with you. So that's why half of it has been the presentation. And thank you, Hilary, brilliantly for showing how time management works in a presentation. That was really impressive. So if you have any thoughts, any questions, please, you can either post them into chat, but what we'd really like is if just to raise your hand or take yourself off the mic and just jump in just for this next sort of 15 or 20 minutes. Let's have a dialogue. Yeah, Angana, and then Uday.
Yeah, this looks fascinating. Thank you so much, Hilary and Roy, for sharing. I just wanted to know a little more about the use of the word wisdom, because the quote which was there, the previous quote on the left-hand side, actually was talking about how the use of word actually comes from the Eastern thought and tradition. So I was just wondering why this particular word, and which are the thoughts that you're referring to when you're saying, when you're talking about Eastern thoughts and how that's been influenced in the matrix.
Did you want to jump in that, Hilary, or shall I?
Will you jump in first, Roy, and then I'll come in afterwards.
Okay, so in terms of, if you go back a slide, just so that we can reference the quote that we included there. Both Hilary and I have a fascination for the wisdom traditions, and it's particularly interesting for us to look at what we can learn from the wisdom traditions of these, which are in many ways intuitive and transrational. And particularly my experience of within Buddhism is the idea of getting this balance between the seen and the unseen. And wisdom isn't knowledge. Wisdom, we have a great fascination in the West for showing how much knowledge we have. But knowledge without some insight to guide that, which in many ways is intuitive and uncommunicable, is a very challenging area, particularly in the world of academia, who put so much value, and quite rightly so, on knowledge. But we feel very strongly that as we move forward, we need to look backwards. And as we seek to create a global language, we need to be engaging in all world cultures to look at their point of connection rather than their point of difference. Hilary?
Thank you. I think for me, being wise is not getting stuck in any particular position, and recognizing context and contingency. And I think that the wisdom traditions talk very much about being embodied, being in a particular time, in a particular place, being in the moment, not essentializing. You know, a lot of our urban Western tradition involves looking at abstractions, looking at universalizing. And what that means is we often act inappropriately in situations where different responses are required. We also, as Roy said, put too much confidence in our cognition, in our rationality, our reason. We don't listen to what our bodies are telling us in a particular situation, what our hearts might be telling us, what our soul might be prompting us towards. These ways of knowing are really important, particularly in engaging in relationships and thinking about conflict. And so we're trying to encourage people to think much more dynamically about the process of conflict resolution. I forgot to say, many of you will be probably quite surprised to see me creating measures and tools, because you know that I'm very anti sort of quantitative reductionist methodology. So what I've tried to do here, and I forgot to say, by the way, that this also is a conflict style questionnaire that people can take. So there's the audit tool for the school. And then there's also, each of these positions have got questions which people can fill in on a questionnaire in order to understand their particular conflict style. But people act according to how they feel, and the archetypes are really, really useful because they have a mythology associated with them already. There's a school that's used this as part of a professional development activity, and apparently there was this extended conversation about whether teachers have to be dictators in the classroom or not. And so the use of these archetypes to prompt discussion is also a way of just moving away from binaries and hopefully trying to recognize complexity, whilst at the same time giving us tools that people can use in order to measure what might be happening and to think about how they might respond to that.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Lovely. Uday, and then Andrea, and then Tom.
Thank you, Hilary and Roy. And I really liked how you managed to put all of these tools together in a beautiful way. My question is really about these four, let's say, boxes: competition, collaboration, avoidance, and condition, and how we should be dynamic to move between all of these all of these boxes based on the situation. Have you thought of when we should be warrior, or when we should be peacemaker, when peacekeeper, or when servant? Are you planning to further explain whether right now, or maybe later when you're developing this further, to say what signs or indicators or situations that means we should be we should avoid, or we should compete, or we should collaborate?
That's a great question, Uday, and I would say that this is the ongoing conversation. This is education. This is what communities do. They discuss. I mean, what a great question. Do teachers have to be dictators? I mean, I would say not, but some teachers might feel that they have to dictate what happens in the classroom in order to make sure that learning outcomes are met. And so it's not for me to say whether you should be a warrior or a dictator in the classroom, but to provide tools through which people can have these kinds of conversations. What we hope is that if schools engage in these methods, both these audit tools, but then also the activities that we're developing to help schools to deepen their awareness and to learn how to mediate, how to have restorative conversations, how to use breath work to provide calm and sanctuary for people within school. But it's through the activities that they will come to shared understandings about what strategies could be used in which situations.
Can I just add quickly to that? I think Hilary mentioned earlier in her presentation about being present, because at a moment each moment can find us in relationship with ourselves, in relationship with us, and in relationship with the environment. And all of these are a vocabulary that will be articulated within the moment, and that knowing how to act in that moment. Yes, it can be strategic, and yes, we can give examples, and we will be giving examples, not in this session, we don't have time, but it's also very important that there is a trust in the intuitive. There is a trust, because where you act within one situation, another, on a day-by-day, moment-by-moment basis, is both a rational and a transrational. I know that he's got his hand up, we'll speak to Andrew in a moment, but in Tom's school, in Carl Manor School, they're very good at this. They're very, very good at this. Being able to know the difference between fair and being equal is part of the vocabulary of all the children. So it's moving away from a rule book, if you like, and just creating the vocabulary of what it is to be. And that's more complex and also more chaotic. And that's to be welcomed. That's to be welcomed. Okay, Andrea, I'm aware of time. So, Andrea, join us, Andrea.
Hi, sorry,
Hey.
I'm in a kind of funky corner today. No, I think, Roy, you were hitting on some questions that were coming up for me. I think that's per our relationship. You might have been feeling my comments coming about this relationship, because I come from an international school context. And when you talk about competition and warriors and saviors and these different archetypes, very well, very knowingly, and then this idea of teachers as dictators, I think sometimes the pressure that teachers and schools feel in developing, or actually not developing, but forcing curriculum for examination and other means, creates some competition, creates an environment that sparks violence. And so I'm wondering, you talk about a school that you've worked with this in, and I'm just wondering, is there an awareness of some of these other environmental factors that I'm sure a teacher does not consider themselves a warrior or a dictator? I mean, I would imagine if I said to a teacher, you're a dictator, I've had this conversation, maybe not with those words.
Yeah.
But I think that's a fascinating conversation to have. And I use the word fascinating instead of frustrating, because the awareness piece. So I appreciate the audits and the tools. And I'm just wondering, though, how has that been to unpack that in a school environment?
Yeah. Brilliant. So we have Tom here and Simon, actually, who are from a school that's been using some of these methods. So in fact, Tom's got his hand up, so I'll hand over to him to speak in just a moment. But if I can just say something really, really quickly first, it's that this is actually both an audit tool for an individual, so a profiling tool to think, oh gosh, that's interesting, I'm very different with my boss to how I am with my mother, but hey, I'm quite similar with my daughter to how I am with my boss. I wonder why that is, So it is a kind of it's a psychological tool, or it's a way of developing self-awareness. But more importantly, if you do this with different groups that you teach, or if you do it in different circumstances, it very, very quickly becomes obvious that our institutions incentivize particular archetypes at particular times. And so Hemma's here, actually, I think it's probably Hemma Mystery, who's from Cambridge Assessment, and she's going to be helping us to use this so that schools can start to accumulate data. And so a school will be able to see, without naming any names, everything will be anonymized. They'll be able to see, crikey, we are actually incentivizing with our year 9s. People are feeling they have to be dictators. I wonder if that's because of the staffing issues that we have in year 9 or whatever. And so it's as much a tool for the institution to realize what kinds of behaviors are being dragged out of their staff because of the way that they organize processes of teaching and learning. So this is certainly not to essentialize or to demonize any particular individuals. This is a way to understand, gosh, I'm being forced to be a dictator. what can we do about that?
Yeah.
Tom or Simon, would you like
I think Tom or Simon might to jump to add to. I know you're going to ask a question, Tom, but I think you should answer Andrea's as well.
I was going to say, I'm wondering if Simon might want to pick up on that. Actually, I don't know whether are you there, Simon? Might depend on where he's calling in from.
okay.
Yeah, really interesting. And the question I was going to ask was connected to how that maps onto the changing of the systems and the processes, because individuals within the school are formed and shaped, just as Hilary was describing, by the systems and processes that they're part of. I don't know if anybody on the call is familiar with the latest moves within ITT and the significant move towards an increased level of compliance for what it means to be a teacher. And I think what I recognise here is something which is quite countercultural to many of the forces within the wider system, but something which certainly the way that we work, it resonates very deeply with. The idea that we want to have systems and processes that facilitate the development of teacher discernment rather than dictating to teachers so that they can then dictate to children. So I'm really interested in how what you've described enables that fresh improvisation of the systems and processes that are so formative.
Roy, did you want to say something about process here?
Yes. I think the underlying this is a real honouring of systems and bringing in a vocabulary, has been said, to raise, and this term's been used several times, awareness. And another word for awareness is conscious. To be conscious of what is actually happening really, as opposed to what's happening in your own head. And to bring even the language of consciousness into a system can be already prejudiced by individuals. And so using, and again, I'll refer to another colleague, Dr. Luke Roberts' work in systems thinking. We're very clear that we have to bring in simple systems. So, peacemaking, come in, stop this, intervention. And then as it gets more complex in peacemaking, peacekeeping, it moves into the more complicated systems. But actually at the level of peace building, you have to work at a chaotic level. You have to work and move towards a self-organizing. And chaotic, even the word chaotic is misunderstood in many educational settings because it's perceived to be without control. And again, without referring to Calm Manor again, Calm Manor is a chaotic place of learning. It has real order. You do your check-in, you do your check-up, you do your check-out. This is a secondary and primary. So you have real honouring of the simple and the complicated, but you're not frightened of the chaotic and the self-organising. And from a systems point of view and an awareness point of view, if you're seeking to deal with complex and chaotic situations, you can't use simple and complicated methodologies. And so all we're introducing is a system within the matrix and within the profiling tool that says, is this a simple situation, a complicated one, a chaotic or self-organizing? But that's the engine of the car. If you like, the archetypes and the basic structure is a simple framework, but it isn't simplistic. So introducing simple language, even if it's the archetype, am I a warrior or am I a dictator, has underneath that a huge amount of opportunity for conversation. But all we're providing is a framework for people to return to and say, well, where am I here? Where am I here? Which is what you do, Carmen. Hilary?
Yeah, I think I would add into that I'm writing a book at the moment. I'm loving it. I'm so lost in my writing. It's such a privilege, called Rewilding Education. And I'm talking about the interface between modernity and post-modernity, between humanism, post-humanism, capitalism, post-capitalism, empirical truth, post-truth. And what's really fascinating me at the moment is that in times of modernity, we tried to constrain the knowledge that people would acquire. We thought in terms of binaries and linear progress. But what Roy's describing there in terms of complexity implies that we can't possibly know what our young people need to know and be able to do for the lifestyles and jobs of the future. And they are bombarded by so many stimuli every single day. What we can do is we can support them to know how to be nodes in a system that have the capacity to make wise choices in the here and now. That's the purpose of education in our contemporary times. It's not telling young people content of what they should know. It's helping them to become more fully human, to know how to make the decision about what's the right thing to do, how to be in the world, how to experience happiness, well-being, how to have good relationships, how to be in harmony with nature and with the citizens of the world and with community. These are things that will take a lifetime for people to perfect and get right. And in education, we should be supporting young people to be capable of making those decisions. And it saddens me that in many schools, we really are not doing that. In fact, in some cases, we're doing the opposite. And so there are some processes and infrastructures and ideas that we're sharing, such as peer mediation or restorative approaches or wellbeing initiatives or global citizenship initiatives and so on. So there is content to what we're proposing, a lot of online support, but more importantly, it's about how do we engage with process? How do we support young people to become more human in our postmodern world?
Lovely. Tom, did you want to add anything to that before we go on to Irma and David?
I agree wholeheartedly. That feels like a really healthy direction to go in. I'll leave it there. I'll hear some more questions.
Thank you. David and Irma, did you want to ask your question?
Oh, hello. Yes, thank you. First of all, I should say that in my school days, sadly, I was a victim of bullying, so this really speaks to me. Looking at the questionnaire, I think it's wonderful to have the audit. But trying to put myself back in my sort of old 11-year-old head or whatever, I think I would have been very reluctant to answer this honestly had it not been anonymous. So I think because and that might have been not just fear, maybe pride, refusing to actually sort of face up to the sort of things that I was facing at the time. And I'm reminded a bit about the very well-known sort of slightly at a tangent, the very well-known story of Erin Gruel and the Freedom Writers, and they were in a very tough sort of inner-city school. I trust everybody's heard of that story in Long Beach, where gang violence was the order of the day, where there were sort of extraordinary divisions in the classroom, and Ms. Gruel first of all went in as an authoritarian teacher, which was sort of the only way to get through to this class, but then she sort of progressed and transformed, if you like, into sort of an inspirational figure, bringing up, Zlata Filipovich's diary and Frank's diary and so forth, and actually sort of broadening the perspective of the students to a broader understanding of the world in which they belong, and that we all share a common role.
Absolutely, and of course the questionnaires will be anonymized.
But I think one of the points, and I think it's a really good point you've raised, what if someone fills in the profile and it's skewed? In many ways, the profile has two purposes. It's about to listen to the response of the individual and reflect upon it, but it's also to introduce them to the language. And I think there will be instances where people will fill it because I've been doing profiling for about and positive psychology for about 30 years. But even if someone fills it out with the desire to appear to be seeing the world like this, when you're engaged in dialogue with them, when you're actually going through the process, then it becomes apparent what they actually mean. But it's a step in, it's a point of connection. And one of the things, again, going back to Simon and the team in Leeds, when we worked on the Leeds project to make Leeds a city of the child, that the mantra from Nigel Richardson as a Children and Young People Services lead there was only connect, living fragments no longer. And he said, all we need to do is to find a way to connect. And once we've got that connection, that will build. So it's an excellent point. Start where you need to and move to where you want to is very good. Because of time, are you okay if we move to Adila? Could you give us your question, please?
Hello. Hi, everyone. My first one is a technical question. I'm very sorry. I was late in the beginning. I missed some part of the presentation. I'm seeing the session is recorded, so I would like to know if it can be available later. And the rest of the part, whatever I have heard, it was amazing, and I'm really inspired with the new model. And I resonate a lot with the inner and outer. And just one quick comment and one question was like, especially the East and West, like someone mentioned, I think Ankana was saying about the East and the West. And I found this model very much resonating more from moving from the duality to the non-duality traditions. The East talks a lot. So I could see like the merger of many traditions happening with the models and the individual and the collective, and also the spiritual and the experiential side of many of the points which mentioned there. But I missed one slide in the beginning, but I'm not sure. But I know it's based on the conflict resolution aspects of it. But I was wondering whether this model was also like comparing with peacemaking, peace building and all, address the conflict transformation aspect. If I missed it, I can check it in the recording. But I was wondering, is it within the resolution or in the transformation approach? Thank you.
Thank you, Adila. Keeping my fingers crossed, by the way, that you'll be able to come to Cambridge to do your PhD. Yes, I did begin with looking at peacekeeping, peacemaking, peace building, and there's a link you'll see with the matrix with the peace and conflict literacy window, that we've got peacekeeper, peacemaker, peace builder integrated into that. So there's a connection between these two different models. And so the conflict and peace literacy window is more about the peacemaking element. So this is how do we respond to conflict? Whereas the matrix is about how do you keep people safe in the first place, and then how do you build capacity for all of this peace work? I mean, I think probably people might not be able to envisage, Roy, what it is that schools might be actually doing. I mean, we've spoken about complexity and systems change and so on. I mean, for example, they may be developing their peer mediators so that year nines, the sort of 13, 14-year-olds will be able to provide mediation for the 11, 12-year-olds when they find themselves in conflict, or the school may decide that they want to use the 5 restorative questions and to focus on that. They may want to focus on the environmental and global aspects, and all of these can be made available through online resources, through coaching, through mentoring. The aim is to get schools to do as many of these activities themselves as possible, but with coaching provided by members of CPEG actually, and others, so that we're building capacity within institutions rather than coming in as experts and consultants to do the work. So Roy and I have a big job to do to create the websites and databases that we're going to be able to draw on in order to be able to provide a bespoke website for schools, so that members of the school community can then use the resources to begin to address issues once they've identified them through the audit tools that we've been developing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, can I add to that? That we are already, as you would expect, doing some sort of pilot project, and we've been doing a project with school in Oldham, St Margaret's, whereby we will create, it's a global citizens project, it's a peace project, but the idea of taking people through a structured process of exploring values and drives, but also creating a web page, which is unique to the school and only accessible by the school. But within that, capturing the story, capturing the lessons, capturing the resources, so that when we leave, and this is a problem with many trainers. I've been involved in school training for about 30, 40 years, is what happens when the trainer goes? What about the expert comes in, does their stuff, but they go, and without them, without the person, it can drop. But what we have now is access to technologies that will make us redundant. And I think that's really important. We don't want to come in and be seen as the experts. We are the collaborators to help a culture and a community become the best that it can be. I'm aware we've got 4 minutes, so we've got one more slide, but we do have a question from Naru, which I'd like to take before we finish off.
Nora.
That's okay.
Thank you, Nora.
Nora, sorry.
Hi, no worries. Thank you. I guess I had a bit of a question, because you talk about language and sort of raising this awareness and giving the capacity to talk about it. And I'm wondering, since this is about, it goes beyond interacting with humans, it's about like the human heart, right? And like interacting on this visceral level. And I'm wondering, based on the experiences at the schools you've had so far, or based on just generally what you assume, I don't know how far within, actually practically applying it in many schools this is, but how much does it have to do with an ontology shift and understanding that we're all one, or like that we are part of a human family, right? That we are one human body, and if one of us is hurt, then others are also hurt. And this, these concepts of Ubuntu and all of those. And I'm wondering, when my parents run a school in Slovakia, Brilliant Stars, and when we were doing teacher training, we realized that once the ontology had shifted, the practicalities make sense, right? So once you understand that it's not zero-sum power that we're working towards, it's more generative, then solutions sort of just, like snowball into effect. And I'm wondering whether you could sort of respond on what you've observed.
You've said it better than I could, Nora. That's exactly what when I said about all the nodes in the system, the humans, the adults, the children, all operating within a system. It's not that we can tell them what they should know and what values they should have, what they should be able to do at any one moment in time. It's that we can help to prepare them so that they can make that decision wisely when the time comes. And so it's definitely that. And again, Carmana, the students are very much starting to do that, and through a very simple practice, well, many simple practices, but a very powerful one of check-in at the beginning of the week at a school community in which people care about each other. Everybody operates through circles. They have a feeling of family, of togetherness. This makes a big difference to the way that people are as they walk around the school, so that destructive conflict doesn't happen as much in the first place. And when conflict does occur, it can be dealt with dynamically and creatively, and it can bring about benefits through being responded to in the right kind of way. So absolutely, you've summarised it as I would hope to do.
Okay. Nora, the other thing is we could now begin another hour based upon exactly that question. But we're going to have to finish off now. So Hilary, if we just share the final slides, and I will put into the chat for you a document that Hilary and I are working on, which gives a rationale that we're developing with the Cambridge assessment. Please don't share it with anyone else at this moment, but for those people on this call, if you do have a look at it and you want to connect with us to discuss it, then please do so.
So So final thoughts then, despite all of our postmodern complexity and our need to move away from binaries and straight lines, we can't find ourselves paralyzed by the enormity of the task and the complexity. And so a quote here from that Roy has found, if you know but don't do, you don't know. And as educationalists, we are there, we're taking actions every day, and we'd very much like this work to support all of us to make wise decisions and to enable the young people in our care to be able to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Simon sends his apologies. He was here, his microphone isn't working. And like Tom, he agrees wholeheartedly. And yes, Tom, there is a need for organisational readiness to engage with this project, but part of the profiling is to create that organisational readiness. So thanks very much for participating, and thanks again to CPIRG for hosting another important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over to you, Uday.
Hi, Hilary, would it be possible to just ask a quick question? In terms of these tools and stuff, are they accessible for schools to sort of start using them, or is there a process in which people can sort of start engaging?
Hemma's here actually. I don't particularly want to put her on the spot unless she chooses to.
Uday, do you want to stop recording? No,
1 second. I think that's.
Oh, there
Hello.
she is. The voice.
Hemma's from Cambridge